Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Years ago when I started doing videos on YouTube, it never occurred to me how far into the weeds I could get discussing legal issues and have people actually say they enjoy hearing me talk about it. And so one of the things I assumed I would never talk about would be jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a topic that comes up in law school and you learn about it, but it's a real foundational thing and you learn about it and you move on. And it does arise occasionally later on in your legal practice, but generally speaking, not a whole lot. You don't even think about it all that much. So for instance, in my cases, when I have a lemon law claim, I represent somebody who bought a car. They bought the car, it's manufactured by a company, and they bought it in Michigan. So under Michigan's lemon law, if the car is a lemon, we can sue the manufacturer. Well, the manufacturer sold the car in Michigan because my client bought it in Michigan, and they have a presence in Michigan. Let's say it's General Motors. Well, their headquarters are downtown Detroit in Michigan, so I can sue them in Michigan. Now, that's simple jurisdiction with respect to the state. The question is, what county do I sue them in? And I have a couple choices, and there actually are statutes on the blue books behind me that say what jurisdictions are defined by within certain cases. And so in a contract case, for instance, you can always sue the defendant where they reside. You can sometimes sue them where you reside if you are the person who entered into the contract. And you can also sometimes sue them where the contract was formed. So you can imagine that it's possible there might be 3 acceptable places to file that lawsuit. That's talking about venue. But those places all have jurisdiction because they're all within the state. And so venue and jurisdiction often are interconnected or overlapping quite a bit. But the idea of jurisdiction is that a court has the ability, the right in essence, to hear a case. And so if you were to file a divorce case in district court in Michigan, district courts aren't empowered to hear divorce cases. And so the court would actually have to say, we don't have jurisdiction over this matter. You've got to go to circuit court. And you could say, but hey, you're in Michigan, I'm in Michigan, my soon-to-be ex is in Michigan, this is a Michigan court, I want you to hear the case. No, this court does not have jurisdiction over that type of case in this state. So the jurisdiction will go with certain courts sometimes, but the question is often what state does something get tried in and or what area or what place. And so here's the question. What happens if a crime takes place in outer space? What happens if a crime takes place on the moon? And that actually is what popped up here. Matthew sent me this, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly because he spells it in the French manner, Mathieu. I can see a couple different possible pronunciations there. But from the CBC, crimes on the moon could soon be added to Canada's criminal code with a proposal contained in the budget implementation bill that was recently tabled in the House of Commons. Yeah, this is basically a budget bill is being passed with all kinds of things tacked onto it. It's passing through the House of Commons. Imagine a budget bill in Washington with stuff getting tacked onto it and it gets sent to a committee or something. Similar to that. Mark Gollum wrote the story. The long arm of Canadian law could extend way out onto the lunar surface as the government seeks to put Canadian astronauts on notice that if they were to commit a crime on the moon, they could face criminal charges back on Earth. I want to be tried on the moon. Nope. You're going to be tried in Canada. The proposed amendment to the code that would include crimes committed on the moon can be found deep inside the 400-plus page Budget Implementation Act that was tabled recently in the House of Commons. So as you can imagine, here's a question for you. Let's suppose that they send a mission to the moon, and it's got a Canadian astronaut on board and an American astronaut on board and, a French astronaut on board, right? And on the moon, there's several crimes committed by these people against each other. They get into a Three Stooges-like brawl on the surface of the moon. And it's real. They get brought back to Earth. Where does the trial take place? Well, they're basically saying if the Canadian commits a criminal act, that he or she could be tried in Canada. The criminal code already accounts for astronauts who may commit crimes during space flight to the International Space Station. So apparently they've already discussed this as to what happens if you're traveling back and forth. And it's interesting because I talked before about, where causes of action arise and where you got to file actions. And obviously, if you're in space, you're not in a particular place on Earth that has jurisdiction. So they say, well, we've already passed laws saying that we have jurisdiction to cover you when you're traveling to and from the space station. Any such crime committed there is considered to have been committed in Canada. So again, this is with respect to Canadian astronauts. Obviously, if an American committed a crime in space, they wouldn't get tried in Canada for it. But with Canada part of the Lunar Gateway project, which also includes a planned trip to the moon, the federal government has decided to amend the criminal code to incorporate those new space destinations. In the Budget Implementation Act under the subhead Lunar Gateway, Canadian crew members, the amendment reads, a Canadian crew member who during a spaceflight commits an act or omission outside Canada that if committed in Canada would constitute an indictable offense is deemed to have committed that act or omission in Canada. And so the statute says specifically that Canada's down here, but while you're up there, if you commit a crime, it's as if you committed it down here. That, according to the amendment, includes any act or omission committed on the Lunar Gateway while being transported to or from the Lunar Gateway or on the surface of the moon. So it's going to cover them to and from and while they're up there. Canada has committed to participating in the Lunar Gateway, which is a NASA-backed orbiting space platform. Indeed, the 2022 federal budget makes note that the 2019 budget announced an investment of $1.9 billion over 24 years to build and operate Canadarm3 for the project. In December 2020, the Canadian Space Agency and NASA signed a treaty confirming Canada's participation in the Lunar Gateway. It also confirmed that a Canadian will be part of the Artemis II mission, the first crewed mission to the moon since 1972. It's in anticipation of these missions that the federal government wants to amend the criminal code to include potential crimes that could take place. The issue of potential crimes committed in space came up in 2019 when NASA investigated what was being characterized as the first alleged crime in space. I did a video about that a long time ago. An astronaut on a 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station was accused by her estranged spouse of improperly accessing bank records from space. She was later cleared, and the other one was charged with making a false statement to federal authorities. The case did raise potential issues related to space law. As the case made headlines, a professor at McGill University's Institute of Air and Space Law wrote that the investigation has served as an urgent wake-up call to establish new rules of extraterritorial law. And the story goes on and on from there, but the point simply is this. They talk about jurisdiction, and jurisdiction is, like I said, the ability or power of a court to hear a case and make decisions thereon and make rulings that control in that case, okay? So if you got charged with a crime, you get brought into a court, the court needs to have jurisdiction over you and the crime. And quite often, blue books behind me will say, for instance, that if a crime gets committed in the state of Michigan, the state has jurisdiction to have a court handle that. And then it'll say, and the venue of that is where it'll be tried, will be the county in which the crime is committed. That's quite common. That's quite common. That's what it says. And so if you were in court charged with a crime that happened in Michigan, and the allegation is that it happened in this county, and you're being put on trial in that county, you can challenge the jurisdiction of the court. But all the prosecutor's got to do is show, well, crime was committed in Michigan, and the allegations are that it was committed in this county. Now, there have been situations where somebody has been accused of a crime, and it's unclear where the crime occurred. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not going to get into it now because that's so far afield, although, quite frankly, we're talking about the moon. But Canada has taken steps towards making this law. It's not law yet, but they're making it such that crimes on the moon could soon be added to Canada's criminal code, and it's in a proposal in a budget, which, if passed, would make it such that if an astronaut, a Canadian astronaut, were to go to the moon and either on the way there or there commit a crime, they could be tried in Canada as if the crime had occurred in Canada. Bigger question was, of course, what happens if there's a dispute where like a Canadian and an American get into a fight up there and they both claim the other committed a crime? Because I suspect the Americans are going to say the exact same thing. Well, our guy gets tried over here. They're going to say, no, we want to try him over here. No, send your guy over here first. So there's issues there as well. But it's an interesting story from the CBC.ca. Mark Gollum wrote it. Matthew sent it. And crimes on the moon committed by Canadians could be tried in Canada if the law gets passed. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. An Elton John pun for you. It's a little bit funny.